Okay, so right.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I can see the meeting is now live.
Yeah, we're now live. Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm conscious there may be some general public listening in on the YouTube channel. So I will just introduce myself as Darren Tice, so Councillor Darren Tice. So I'm chairing this panel this evening. So welcome if you are listening in or watching in. Can I ask panel members, please, if you're not speaking, to mute your microphone, please, and that will certainly help with any potential feedback or disturbances we may have this evening. So welcome, Happy New Year to everybody this evening. What a start! Anyway, we could talk all night about events elsewhere, but this evening we're really focused purely on Huntingdon TM. So welcome. I'll make a start. So Adam, can we just first of all deal with any apologies, please?
Yeah, I've received apologies from Councillor Taverner.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else aware of any other apologies this evening? No. Okay. Right, lovely, thank you. Okay, so just turning to item 1, I'm just going to turn to the minutes, not many of them, page by page. If anyone has any questions or comments, can you please stop me? I am looking at, and raise your virtual hand, please, if you're able to. So page 3, page 4, and page 5. I don't see any comments, in which case...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Banks, you had a hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 430, paragraph 7, I thought, Councillor Smith, I thought this was a good way of informing people, and would be a small amount of money, I think, spent to save a far greater amount of money in long term. We know advertising works, that's why all companies use advertising, and I think this is a form of advertising, and I'm sure it will bring a good result if we were to stick on to the bins, what should be in and what shouldn't. That's my opinion, and I hope we can do something about it. I know the cost is, and the operation of doing it is quite...
Okay, can I just stop you, Councillor Banks?
Yes, certainly.
We're not here to debate on the minutes.
Sorry, yes.
Just to comment on the accuracy of the minutes.
Yeah, no,
so as long as we're happy if they're accurate, I think that's really the purpose for, this evening. But thank you for your... no, not at all. So in which case, welcome, Councillor Giles. Nice to see you at sunset. So can I have a proposer, please, for the minutes?
I'll agree.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Banks. That's lovely. Thank you very much. In which case, I'm just going to move on to item 3 then. And again, just to remind you all, and again, this is partly for the public as well, we're just going to go through this really and just perhaps pull out anything which is relevant to this particular
Chairman,
panel.
I noticed you missed out item 2, members' interest.
Thank you. I'm getting too excited. Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? And thank you, Adam. I think I know the answer. Yeah, I know one member did mention he has a private pilot's license, but it's not actually on this panel. He's just observing this evening, so I don't believe that's a problem, personally. Okay, unless that member wishes to declare an interest, obviously it's up to you. No. No. Can't hear you, Councillor Palmer.
Sorry about that. I'm not on your committee. It's
Correct.
only just because I am a pilot. I have no interest in this at all, and it's only that if you want some clarification on anything that we're discussing, I'm more than glad to help you out on it.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Okay, so now we're on to item 3. So if we just want to go through page by page, please. 7 straightforward, page 8, 9, I'm flipping through, page 10. Obviously, we've got at the bottom of page 10, we've got the item here we're dealing with this evening. Just going on to page 11, customers and partnerships. Are we on schedule, Adam, for the vehicle charging and the parking items to be on the agenda for next month?
I've not heard anything about that. So as far as I'm aware, they are. In fact, actually, the leader last night confirmed that decriminalised parking is on track. But for the other one, I take it as no news is good news at this stage.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So I'll skip page 12 because that's all performance and growth. Just page 13, looking halfway through there, we've got lettings and Auckland and lettings review. Again, are they likely to be on schedule for the March meeting, Adam, as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware, yes. But again, I can write to John and ask him to clarify. Okay,
and just while we're on this item, I think it's relevant. We are proposing to hold a meeting in the early spring, so sooner rather than later, to talk around the district's response to the recent flooding that we've had. So it's not something we're going to debate right now. I just, Adam, I don't believe we've got a date in mind yet, or if we had, then obviously.
No, I mean, no, we haven't got one yet. We've there is a document, a scoping document that is due to be agreed early next week, and then obviously things will move on from there.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So I only mention it because we're not going to talk about flooding this evening, but I do want to reassure members and reassure any members of the public who are listening and watching in this evening that the District Council clearly takes this very seriously. We are going to call a task and finish group to look at the wider issue. It's not something you can deal with in one meeting. It needs expert witnesses and so forth. So we've asked officers to produce a scoping paper, which is happening now, and then we will have an all-member group to look at this in some detail. So members, I'm not going to take any questions on that at this point because it's clearly not on the agenda, but I just wanted you to all be aware that's also happening. And Adam, just at the risk of indulging members, I did see there's also another joint meeting coming up later on, which members are all being invited to. Can you just alert members to the purpose of that meeting as well, please?
Yes, it's to do with there'll be a COVID-19 recovery plan presented, and that's at the meeting on the 25th of January. For admin purposes, it's under the remit of the performance and growth panel, but all scrutiny members are invited to attend that.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So it's going to end up being quite a busy month for some of you. So thank you. In which case, we're going to turn to the substantive item on the agenda, which is item 4. Just before we do that, please be aware that item 5 is going to be deferred, so we won't be dealing with neighbourhood policing on this agenda. So the main item will be item 4. It's been deferred to a future meeting. I don't believe we necessarily know whether it will be the February meeting, but certainly it's not going to be dealt with this evening.
No, it's more likely to be April.
Okay. Right, so members, I'm going to ask the relevant portfolio holder, which is Councillor Prentice, to introduce item 4, and then I'm sure we'll then hear from members of NATS who will give us a short presentation this evening. So, Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just a very brief introduction from myself before I hand over to Finlay, who will introduce the members of NATS. We've all got the report in front of us. We're looking for appropriate comments which may be forwarded to Cabinet to discuss in the future. So I'll be very interested to hear what members have to say. I'll be making plenty of notes. With that, I'll pass over to Finlay, who will do the formal introductions to the NATS people.
unmute myself. Yes, we're grateful to Nicole Morris and Colin Wyatt for attending to answer questions tonight rather than give a presentation. This is really just to give members the opportunity to comment in advance of Cabinet deciding whether a formal consultation response from the Council is required on this issue, and if it is required, what that should be. There are some incredibly detailed documents that have been attached as appendices to or referenced by links in the report, and a map in Appendix 1 showing the affected area. In essence, this centres on proposals to change or to make changes to the inbound flight paths as aircraft approach London Luton Airport, with the underlying objective of having clear separation between the traffic and any holding zones between Luton Airport and Stansted Airport, because at the moment these overlap. And the underlying rationale for everything here is to separate that traffic and provide more efficient means of getting in and out of Luton Airport. As far as Huntingdonshire is concerned, the actual approach routes and the descent routes into the airport are not above our district. So the only direct impact, immediate impact, is the new holding zone, which is basically above the line of the A1 in a sort of circular pattern between Alconbury and St Neots. There is a really good consultation website. Councillor Prentice and myself have attended a webinar presented by NATS, which was really informative in explaining the rationale behind the proposals and what was happening. And we've circulated information about the consultation to all of the town and parish councils in the district, and pointed out that the best way for them to respond would be directly on the NATS website. I believe, well, I know that some have done so already and others intend to. Just as background to the meeting tonight, we've circulated all of the comments that have come in from the parish councils so far. So really the issues for us, I suppose, are the presence of the holding zone, where it is, and any impact on the borough and its residents arising from proposals. So having introduced Nicole and Adrian, and I think, is that Adrian joined in as well? So certainly see Adrian and Adrian and Colin. I think we can hand over to the members to ask any questions of the NATS and Luton Airport team, and then decide whether any comments are necessary, desirable to forward on to Cabinet, with a view to a response potentially being made to the consultation. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So the way I'll play it this evening, because I'm conscious there's a lot of people here this evening, is pretty much as Finlay has just suggested. We'll ask representatives from NATS to maybe just say a few words. I understand they're not going to give a full presentation, which is fine. But I want to give the first opportunity to NATS representatives first of all. And then I'm going to have to be fairly formal about this because there's so many of us. If they want to ask questions, then just raise your hand. Because the purpose this evening, everybody, just so we're absolutely clear on this, is to give enough comments, contributions to Cabinet, who will then decide whether or not to make a formal representation on behalf of the District Council and obviously our residents as well. And that's how I understand it. So we're not going to go through page by page. It's going to be a bit more free flowing. So I'm going to just hand over to Nats and Adrian, Nicole, and Adrian, if you just want to just in your own speed, please. I'll just hand over to Nicole, perhaps, first of all. who's doing most of the nodding at the moment. So over to you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. So I'm Nicole Morris. I'm the Airspace and Noise Performance Manager at London Luton Airport. I'm joined by Colin Wyatt, who works for NATS, and also Adrian Ryman, who also works for NATS. So this is a co-sponsored proposal from both London Luton Airport and NATS, who do the air traffic control. Hopefully Colin might be able to share his screen. We have got a presentation that we run through in our webinars, which are all available to view online, so the public can go back and have a look at them. So we can perhaps just run through a few slides on that, particularly I guess around the hold location, because that is obviously of most concern to you.
Yep. Hi there. Yes, hopefully you can hear me and see everything okay. I'm Colin Wyatt, and I have a presentation which is the same one that Mr. Flett and your other Councillor Prentice, I think it was, has already seen. This is actually about 20-25 minutes long, but however, I'm very, very happy to just rattle through the very, very basics of it very, very quickly. The paperwork that Mr. Flett has put together, I have read, was supplied to us, and it is very, very accurate, is entirely reasonable, and absolutely presents everything correctly. So I'm happy to do a quick rattle through if everyone's okay for me to do that. If that's if you have enough time for me to do that, is that okay for me to do so, sir? Okay,
thank you. That's absolutely fine. It's probably obvious, Colin, but I'll say it anyway. Because I know you've given presentations across the whole region, not just in Huntingdonshire. We're only interested in our district, in Huntingdonshire, as Finlay said. So please, and the obvious question is why us? Why is it located where it's located? And just perhaps slowly take us through the impact on our district. And as Finlay's already said, that's from Sydney, it's up to Auchenbury, so it covers, quite frankly, the whole, kind of south-north of our district. So I'll leave that over to you. And yes, we do have 20 minutes for your presentation. So
okay, that's fine. What I'll do then is I will omit about half of the presentation, because that's very much separate from your area of interest. So what I'll do is hopefully, with a bit of luck, can you, is my thing working correctly? Can I, if I click on this, can you see the screen? And if it's okay, I will turn my camera off for the time being, mainly because I'll be looking at multiple screens on my side here to make sure that I'm running everything correctly. Okay, so clearly it says it will be recorded. It's not going to be recorded because this is obviously your meeting, not ours. I will skip through fairly quickly. The introduction briefly, will it affect you? Well, we'll talk about that shortly. What happens at the moment? Why does there need to be a change? And then option 1 and option 2, but these are probably outside your area of interest. So I will probably just stick with the first batch here. And like I say, I'm happy to take questions, and as is Nicole, as is Adrian. I will crack on quickly then. So firstly, thanks to Nicole also, and thanks to everybody here for listening to us today. We are proposing a change to the arrival flight paths only. The sponsors, as we said, are Luton Airport and NATS, London Luton Airport and NATS. In order to make a change to airspace, the specific process we need to follow is the Civil Aviation Authority's CAP 1616 process. That's the specific document that is the Bible, if you like, for how we do airspace change in the UK. It's not just Luton or NATS, it's anybody who needs to make an airspace change must follow the same process. That is a 7-stage process. We are currently at stage 3. That is consultation, the formal section of the consultation where we are at the moment. Stages 1 essentially sets up the premise for the need for an airspace change, and stage 2 is the very, very early design concepts that then get discussed and then progressed to stage 3 for consultation. Why we want to hear from you? Yes, we want to hear from anybody who is likely to be impacted by the proposal. We want you to help shape the final design. I realise I am reading essentially off the screen. It's important that I get that across, in that nothing here is absolutely set in stone at all. There's a lot of people who are telling us that they think it's fait accompli. That isn't the case. Any feedback we get, we are legally required, as I'm sure you guys yourself know. If you're doing a consultation yourself, you are required to consider every response as it arrives. So we're exactly the same situation. I will do a brief map here now. This is an area that explains where potential changes may occur. I'll run through it quickly, and I'll bring the whole thing up rather than wait for all the animations to occur. At the moment, there are 2 holding patterns which are shared. Let me skip to the next slide. That'll make me maybe a little bit better. this explains why the holding pattern that we're looking at has to be in this vicinity. From a very overly simplistic point of view, from an air traffic control point of view, as you can imagine, it's very complex. These are two of the major routes in the UK, the major air traffic flows. One is northbound like this, heading towards the northwest like that, and the other is coming this direction to the southeast. Those are the part of the main spine of the country. The next part of it is the east-west flow like this. So likewise, so traffic, for example, departing, going out towards the east and to Europe follows this kind of path in this direction at all levels. Arrivals or overflights come in this direction. Some may continue into London and descend. Some may make a right turn and go up towards the northwest and so on, out towards the ocean. Others may continue further west and so on. So this slide is trying to explain why the location that we have selected is very, very important to us. The next part of it goes into the East Anglian Air Force bases. So the US Air Force bases at Mildenhall and Lakenheath, they're roughly where the red blob is there. They tend to fly their fast jets, their cargo jets, cargo aircraft, and their tankers in this kind of area. Clearly from that, there's a bit of a gap where we think we can put our routes and proposed hold area in. As I've already just said, the holding area is planned to be in this location. It must be in this general location, but there is potential to move it in small directions in the vicinity. But that doesn't mean to say that we're closed to anything that you have to say from the point of view of a formal response from the council. Hopefully that clears that part up for the explanation as to why it is where it is. From a side note point of view, if you'll allow me to go to my other screen here, and I'll bring this in. You may have already mentioned, I think you've already mentioned that you've been to the virtual exhibition, which looks like this. Inside the exhibition itself, which I shall take you into shortly, there's a variety of pieces of information that you can look at. Over here, why do we need a hold at all? If I click on that banner there, this is freely available, anyone can see this. It explains why the holding pattern is required. Hopefully it'll load fairly quickly. A bit of luck. I promise you it is there. And it also explains, there we go, it explains a little bit about the holding pattern itself, what it's there for, how it works. This is a more stylized, perhaps, version of the slide you've just seen. It explains what's going on here. It also explains further down how a holding pattern actually works in practice. So one of the things I'd like to highlight is each level in the hold is 1,000 feet apart, and there will only ever be one aircraft at any level at any given time. The lowest aircraft in the entire vicinity would be around 8,000 feet. So in theory, there could be one aircraft in the hold at 8,000 feet, and then another aircraft, and then, for example, it leaves the hold heading in this direction to go towards Luton, and then the next aircraft would start to descend from 9,000 to 8,000 feet. That's if the hold is used. And we're expecting, from an air traffic point of view, because the airspace change would make the region very much more efficient, that we wouldn't expect to hold all the time. At the moment, the holds at Laurel and Abbott, these ones here, are used daily. And the complexity is such that aircraft arriving from the east into this hold here then have to then descend and go beneath the other hold to the west. So there's one over here at Sudbury called Abbott, one over here at Royston called Laurel. All the traffic from here has to get to Luton via the other hold. So that makes this area especially complex, and that's why we're doing this airspace change. So moving the air traffic for Luton up to here massively increases the efficiency, which means the likelihood of holding is far lower. I'll return to the presentation, and hopefully that can make some more sense slightly here. So here again, if I now briefly summarize the current situation, which I've just described briefly, it looks a bit like this. All aircraft arriving into Luton Airport and Stansted Airport share holds and routes. So all arrivals into Luton and Stansted from the east go here to start with, to Sudbury to Abbott. All arrivals to Luton and Stansted currently go to, from the south, from the west, northwest and so on, arrive at the Laurel Hold over Royston. What this means is it's pretty much unique in the UK for two of the 5 biggest airports in the country to share arrival routes and to share holding patterns, which is why our plan, which I will click through, is to essentially detangle the Luton arrivals by moving them higher and out the way of the Stansted arrivals. So here, rather than the entire Luton and Stansted joining at this level here, only the Stansteds would go to the Abbott Hold. The Lutons would come in to the north at a much higher level. Likewise here, the arrivals to Stansted would descend into the Laurel Hold at Royston, whereas the Luton ones would stay 3, 4, maybe 5,000 feet higher in this vicinity and descend more slowly, going towards the north like this, into this vicinity like that. And again, from the west and this northwest, arrivals would be higher in this area and stay higher for longer up to the hold pattern. Now, the beauty from a technical point of view, from a design point of view with this, is that the vast majority of aircraft wouldn't even go into the hold. They would avoid the hold by turning straight onto the arrival routes, which are probably outside your area of interest, because St Neots is there, Huntingdon is here. I believe that's about as far as we go. The traffic south of here would then descend into the runway at each end. If holding was required, and that very much depends on the bunching of the aircraft as they arrive and the overall complexity, they would do this, follow the dashed lines and join. Now, as you saw in the previous slide here, apologies for switching back and forth, but hopefully that makes some sense there. Arrivals would arrive at the level one at a time. So the lowest would start at 8,000, then 9, then 10, then 11, and then 12, up to a maximum of 14. But I very much stress that the likelihood of all the air levels being used at any given time is extremely low, because we think perhaps 1 or 2, maybe 3 at a time in here, if there's a big bunch all arriving at the same time. And as I already stated, in this entire region, the lowest aircraft would be 8,000 feet. All the others would be 9, 10, 11, and so on. They don't all join at 8,000 feet and climb into the hold. They are all descended from above. This is a bit of text. Again, I'll read it out just because we're here at the moment. It is a very complex piece of airspace. It was designed when traffic was lower and aircraft performance was much lower. I am, of course, referring to pre-pandemic traffic levels. Luton and Stansted airports share the holds, which is unique, as I said. If I go back a step over to my other thing here, you'll see that disruption at one airport causes disruption at the other. And that is, if I go over back to this slide here again, if you can imagine an aircraft in this hold here arriving at Stansted at 8,000 feet, say, for example, and you then have 3 or 4 Luton Airport arrivals at 9, 10, and 11 in this hold. And an example could be Stansted Airport suddenly gets a lot of fog, or an aircraft bursts a tyre on the runway. Immediately, you've got a blockage in the funnel, if you will. The bottom aircraft there at 8,000 feet, it can't go anywhere. It has to stay there. Aircraft at 9, 10, and 11 that are going to Luton, there's a lot of complexity all of a sudden. That means these aircraft have to be removed from the hold and taken to the to Luton Airport without being able to descend, essentially, in this area. And likewise, the exact opposite is true, so that an arrival at Stansted could be affected by a Luton runway issue, for example, fog suddenly closing in that might cause a problem there. So the complete dependency of Stansted Airport and Luton Airport arrivals would be solved entirely by this particular proposal. And that is the point of it, because the complexity is such that controllers pre-pandemic controllers were already getting close to having trouble with delays where an aircraft is delayed for longer and longer and longer until it can't be delayed any further. If I may, if I come back on camera very shortly, I will use my my hands to demonstrate something that I think hopefully you can see me shortly. Hopefully you can see me, okay. If I can demonstrate with my hands, roughly there are 3 or 4 peaks. Let's say there are 4 peak periods throughout the day, pre-pandemic I'm talking, which are, say, early morning, mid-late morning, lunchtime, afternoon, and then into the evening. And the safe level, if you like, of air traffic control is a certain period at a certain intensity. So if the mountain peaks that I've just described, what happens is you chop the top off one of those peaks and drop it into the adjacent valley, which means you're delaying aircraft by moving them from where they want to be to into a later period, which was where the delays come from. And as those peaks get chopped and fit into the valley, clearly those aircraft are delayed by that period each time. What we found before the pandemic struck was that the peaks were merging and becoming more of a plateau. The peaks were still there, but there was no valley to chop the tops off to put them into. So the aircraft were being delayed, and then there wasn't really a place for them to go. So it actually became even more complex. They had to fit in more aircraft in that relatively small volume of airspace. I'll stop using my hands now and go back to the screen, if that's okay. Yeah. That is very simplistic, as you say, but that's how it kind of works. I don't think we need to go much further from the point of view of maps and so on, because we're now getting into areas which are probably outside your region of expertise of kind of coverage. If I kind of cross this line here, if St Neots is around about here, the rest of the changes are essentially south of this kind of line. So I'm happy to go back and concentrate more on this area, but I'd be kind of repeating almost the slides here, which explains why the hold has to be in this area and why we need it. Shall I stop there and let people ask questions? That's probably the best thing to do. And if I leave the picture up, then we can take it from there. I think you're on mute, sir.
Yes, thank you, Colin, for that. That was really helpful. I think what we'll do, I just want to double check with members before we continue, because I did ask you to focus, I think in my view, on our district, Huntingdonshire. Can I just double check that everyone's comfortable with that before we continue? Because you know, I didn't want anyone to feel they were hard done by, that we weren't focusing on any other area just before we move on. So I can see a few hands up. Can you indicate just using your physical hand if anyone wants to talk about any of the areas outside of Huntingdonshire before we move on? I think the answer is no. Okay, that's fine. In which case, we'll ask people to raise their virtual hand. I've got speakers. I had Councillor Banks first. I don't know if Tim or Steve was next, but certainly if we go with Tim and Steve next in that order, and then we go, you know, as people raise their hands. I've listed about 10 questions personally, but I suspect they're going to be asked by other members, so I'm not going to lead in terms of questions. Then members, I'm also happy if you're not a member of this panel, as long as you are a member, if you wish to ask. So I know certainly that Councillor Gardner wishes to speak as well. So can we start off with you, Councillor Banks?
Thank you, Chair. It seems disproportional amount of air traffic coming always over St Neots. Obviously, there must be a reason why the holding was where it is at 8,000 feet, but why there and not further away from a less populated area, and it is getting more populated. So that's just one question I'd like to ask. Thank you.
I'm here to answer that. I attempted to try and convey that earlier. Perhaps I wasn't as clear as I should have been. Yeah. So from the point, if I return to my slide pack, hopefully you can still see. You can see the other screen here. I will zip backwards through my slide pack here. Essentially, this confluence of if you think of it as being the M1 or the M6, this is the major through corridor going northwards towards the north for all air traffic. That is at all levels, from departures from London climbing to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 and all the way up to 30,000 feet, and likewise southwards descending into London or indeed staying high. And again, the east-west corridors like this, that essentially constrains the region to this area. One of the things we did actually try to do, and this is covered in our previous stage, of which is publicly available on the website, the Airspace Change Portal, which the CAA run, we actually tried to look at placing a hold in this area, and it kind of turned out to be more like a duck shoot, if you will, because you'd have a holding pattern in this area, and then you have aircraft firing towards them at right angles, and that didn't work out at all. So we also tried different types of holding pattern. There are types of holding pattern called linear holds or arc holds or point merge holds or trombone holds. We considered those in this similar sort of area and elsewhere. Again, they would not work. They would actually take up more volume than would be required, and that would actually encroach far more on our colleagues in the US Air Force over here at Milton Hall and Lake Heath. Again, moving the hold further up to this direction, that would take it too far away to be of actual use to the controllers, and moving it in this direction again would take you too far away because you then get close to this area. We actually looked at a variety of areas for this. I hope that answers the basics of your question, Councillor Banks, and that again 8,000 feet and above is where the this hold would be. They couldn't be lower than 8,000 in this vicinity.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So can we move on to Councillor Orban next, please? And then it'll be Councillor Criswell afterwards.
Steve's hand was up before mine, Darren, so I'm happy to dip back down.
Go ahead then. Yeah. So Councillor Criswell.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Colin. You've actually half answered my question, because I have two questions, so I'll answer the second, Chairman. I'll ask the second as well, if I may, Chairman. But the main flight path, I was going to question and say surely that would be over the 14,000 feet. Could the holding pattern not move slightly to the west to distance it from Huntingdon and St Neots, bearing in mind that main flight path would be above it, but you're saying there perhaps would still be some conflict. So it was just, moving by a couple of miles to the west, might alleviate some of the pain and be more over the countryside. So that was the first part of the question. Perhaps you can just clarify that. The second part was, quite a few correspondents that have contacted me have made the point that actually flight numbers probably won't return to their previous level, and therefore why is this needed? But I suppose the counter to that, which I wanted to check, was if the flights didn't go back to the 12 or 13 arrivals per hour, presumably this holding pattern would rarely be used. So just something around those flight figures and the number of flights that would probably trigger this needing to be used would be helpful as well, please. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully I can answer them fairly quickly. I'll bring Nicole in very shortly, if that's okay, but I'll answer the first part first, which is we did look into the moving of the whole, where the hold has to be over here. I'm pointing to my own screen. Clearly you can't see what I'm doing over there. Hopefully you can see the other screen. The hold in this position here is there are other airspace structures that are not necessarily shown on this map, because we've tried to keep it relatively simple, straightforward. An example is the hold itself. It also has what's called a protected area associated with it, which is actually a lot larger than this, and we're required to consider where that is in relation to other air traffic flows at the same time. Also, this racetrack pattern that I'm indicating here would be from 8,000 to 14,000 feet. So it's a column almost. So if that column was here only at 1 or 2 levels, that might be possible to do. But again, even at that point, there are still aircraft climbing out of Heathrow to 6, 7, 8, and so on and above through here. And I think Stansted and actual Luton departures themselves also go in this direction at those similar heights. So essentially, we'll be building more complexity into the system rather than reducing the complexity of the controllers of the system there. Second part of it, I think, was that about the numbers of flights and how often the hold would be used? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. With the 12 to 13 pre-pandemic, the indication is it would rarely
Yeah.
be used. So, what sort of flight numbers are we talking about where it would be?
Okay, I'll bring Nicole in just a moment from point of view of I'll do a couple of other things very briefly first. Firstly, we actually also tried to look for no hold at all, and to have no hold at all and to purely rely on the fact that it's a more efficient volume of airspace. We looked into that and it was rejected on the grounds of safety. In that, if I'm being overly simplistic, but your gas boiler in your house may have a safety valve, and if the safety valve is never used, you wouldn't even know about it. But the safety valve has to be there just in case something goes wrong, in case there's a place to put aircraft. So if aircraft could come in a nice orderly fashion, unbunched, then yes, the hold itself would almost never get used. The fact that air traffic being what it is, they arrive in batches of 3, 4, 5 at a time, or occasionally even 2 at a time. If it's just one of those things that they're in the same place at the same time, one will have to be half round the hold, not necessarily a full spin round the hold. So from the point of view of returning to pre-pandemic levels, Nicole, if I bring you in on as regards to discussion on the overall need for this hold or for the proposal itself, is that okay? Can I bring you in?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Colin. So this proposal obviously is around safety and separating out the Luton arrival routes from the Stansted arrival routes. We are getting the question quite a lot of, is it needed now? Will traffic return to the same levels? So we do predict that they will return in time for implementation. So this, if it gets approval, it would not be implemented before February 2022. So we do predict that air traffic will be back to the levels pre-pandemic by the time we implement. There are other forecasts out there in terms of passengers, which obviously there is differences of will business passengers resume, those sorts of things. And obviously we are looking at this as purely one aircraft is a movement effectively, and that's what causing the complexity rather than the number of passengers that are on there. So hopefully that helps, and we do think it's definitely still needed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we're over to Councillor Orban, and then it's Councillor Gardner afterwards, and then followed by Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions. One, although I represent a ward on the right of the north of the district, I actually work in Uttlesford, about 10 or 11 miles north of Stansted. So I'm aware of aircraft noise when the aircrafts go over, although it's been obviously relatively quiet recently. What I can't measure is pollution levels. So what effect would this proposed holding pattern over St Neots, Alconbury, Huntingdon, the villages to the west, what would this proposed pattern have on pollution levels? And the other question I wanted to raise was something that came out in the consultation from one of the villages, was why can't these planes be put in a holding pattern over the North Sea and then brought in directed to their respective airports? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can answer both those, if that's okay, Councillor Orban. Your first question is about pollution, and from the pollution point of view, I would kind of go down the road of, you're talking about local air quality in the vicinity. Is that more appropriate? Okay. So we are required to use the Air Navigation Guidance 2017 as our other part of the Bible, and that is a guidance to the Civil Aviation Authority on its environmental priorities and so on. That particular document states that there's been research that changes above 1,000 feet, I mean airspace changes, of course, flight path changes above about 1,000 feet, the mixing that occurs means that there should be no change, no significant change to local air quality. That is what we're also that's what we've known for some time, and the research was done by the CAA, I think, some years ago now. So 1,000 feet above the ground is around about 6 or 7 kilometres from the airport. And obviously, we're well outside that. We're at 8,000 feet here. There were some concerns that fuel jettisoning or similar was mentioned by a previous webinar that we did, and I'd like to reassure you that is something that simply doesn't really happen in the way that people kind of think it does. Fuel jettisoning only occurs under very specific circumstances, and basically the aircraft types that use Luton, 90% of them can't actually jettison fuel at all. It's to do with if something goes wrong and they need to make a landing, can their landing gear stand the weight? And the answer is 737s and Airbus 320s and all their variants. None of them actually have the facility to dump fuel or jettison fuel because they simply are, they can handle the weight of a full weight landing. There are very few other types these days that would jettison fuel. If they ever did, it would generally be over the sea. It's not a quick thing. It's something that takes an awful long time. They would send it over the sea or as high as possible, so it disperses, and that's something that simply doesn't really happen at the moment. Your other question, which I believe was on holding over the North Sea, I hope my diagram answered that to a certain extent, because if the holders over the North Sea, I'm going to look to my right and point at my screen again, if I do like that. The North Sea is well off the screen over here to the east. Obviously there's Ipswich there, and the coast is away out here. A hold over here would actually make it far more complicated, because the arrivals to Luton would then have to go through either through this existing set of holds here, or we're going to have to come through the north and go down that way and join the routes from the north in the same sort of pattern above, which is what we discussed before, where if we took away this hold, that's essentially what would happen. So it's impractical to try and hold that far away. If you may have heard things from, for example, London City, that's a very different environment, because London City is essentially along the estuary for the Thames, so they can put the holding patterns out towards the sea. They can put it over there because they simply then fly down the estuary essentially, and then make their approach to land like that. Does that answer your question, Councillor Alban?
Thank you. It does. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Councillor Gardner, please, next.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to let you know, I'm the District Councillor for Alconbury Ward, which is to the north of your holding pattern there, but I'm also the County Councillor for the majority of West Huntingdonshire, which is covered by your holding pattern to the west of the A1. Now, when I have been speaking with my residents throughout my division, their main concern is with regard to noise levels, because it states in your document that the noise level at 8,000 feet would be approximately 55 decibels, which is similar to a noisy office. But when you look at the ambient background noise levels in the countryside, which is the majority of my division, you've got background noise levels of 29 decibels. So they're saying to me, they are concerned that the aircraft noise would be intrusive in the rural area. So I just wonder how you can tell me that that would not be the case for my residents.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardner. So yeah, from the point of view of noise, the individual noise events that are noted in the document itself, as you correctly said, they're around about 55 decibels, give or take. That is on the LA Max metric, which is one of the a variety of noise measurements that we use. That indicates like a single event noise, essentially. So if aircraft were at 55 decibels in that area, that does not mean they would not be noticeable. We've never even tried to claim that. That's definitely not the case. What we are required to do by both the airspace change process itself and the air navigation guidance, which I mentioned earlier, which is a government paper produced by the Department for Transport, we're required to prioritise noise impacts below 7,000 feet. which is why we've looked into that. We've had to prioritise that because we are directed to do so, and air flight efficiency is the priority above 7,000 feet. And because we tried to make this hold as high as we possibly could, 8,000 feet and higher, that's why the priority from a noise mitigation point of view is with the lower aircraft, where the lower flight paths, where the impacts are likely to be greater. I may bring Nicole in shortly to discuss further details on noise itself. Forgive me, I've forgotten the second part of your question.
Sorry. Yes, the main part of my question you have now covered, because that was
Okay.
in regard to the noise levels between what they've currently got in the countryside and what they could have with planes at 8,000 feet, if it's 55 decibels. If it's, as another way forward, if the holding pattern, the lowest level was to be 9,000 feet, what sort of difference would that make to residents in the west of Huntingdonshire? If
A very good question.
9,000 feet and then go down from 9,000 feet into the flight path into London Luton, would that be a possible thing that you could look at?
I'll answer that before I bring Nicole in for a general noise discussion. So the two things there is the height of the aircraft is, it sounds obvious, and yet sometimes you'd be surprised that people don't necessarily get it, that the higher aircraft are, the lesser the noise impact. From a measurement point of view, the document, the consultation document, section 3 has the table, which you've no doubt seen, which is 55 decibels. Honestly, I'd be surprised if the background noise was 29 decibels. That seems very low. However, that's of course, yeah, if that's what the opinion is of your local residents, then of course 30 is like in the middle of a quiet library, essentially, I think. So the noise research that the CAA has done, of which the extract in the consultation document is part of that, the noise measurements are not able to be reliably measured below 55 decibels. So we can't necessarily produce figures, which is why that table is blank above 8,000 feet. However, clearly it will be less than 55. And it's difficult to try and make an estimate because of the logarithmic scale of how decibels work, especially in the LA max scale. So I would say less than 55, and of course an aircraft 1,000 feet higher would be quieter than an aircraft at 8,000 feet. So that would make a difference. I don't know if that actually answers your question fully. Does that, Councillor Gardner?
Virtually. The only other point was could not the stack start at night? Why could you not have the lowest level of the stack at 9,000 feet instead of 8,000 feet? That would be the only other.
I'll briefly answer that one by pointing to my screen again, if that's okay. So I might turn my camera off just for a second. Hopefully, there we go. So this will require to just rattle through quickly to one of my later slides that you haven't seen yet and are perhaps not necessarily fully relevant to you. So give me just a moment. I will bring it in here. Forgive me for. Here we go. So here's an example. Let me go to the other end of the runway like that. This will make more sense in just a second. Forgive the busyness of these slides. They were designed to build up in stages. So this is what happens at the moment, and the distance from the Royston Laurel hold here to get to final approach like this is based on being 5,000 feet, basically 5,000 feet over Royston, practically here. Let's say Bassingbourn is our gate, if you will, and then from Bassingbourn descending into land, it's 5,000 feet. So if I carry on to my next picture, which will hopefully be the similar thing. There we go. So we go on what's called a continuous descent operation where we can, which is typically the distance from landing to where you want to be in an aircraft is around about 350 feet per nautical mile. And a nautical mile is 1.8 kilometers, give or take. So therefore the distance from here which is where the aircraft would descend from 8,000 feet and below. They couldn't be below 8,000 feet until they crossed this line here. From here to there is worked out at a nice descent rate, with a little bit in the middle here at 5,000 due to air traffic reasons. There has to be a level period here. Is around about 300 350 feet per nautical mile. So if the aircraft was higher, then the hold would have to be further away, and that is what we've tried to do. Now, what your statement of 9,000 feet to 8,000 feet, that may be possible. So I would urge you to include that in your response to the consultation, to the feedback, because that's the sort of suggestion that may be possible for us to do. Again, we can't promise anything because we have to balance everyone's point of view with this, but it may be possible for that to happen. So I urge you to include that statement or something along those lines in your response when you come to make it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I'm sure we will include that in our response. Just finally, I mean, I've certainly got half a dozen questions here, but I don't want to deny. Councillor Giles has been waiting very patiently there. Councillor Giles, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Colin. It's been most uplifting, I suppose. I have to declare an interest in saying in all my air miles, I've had four occasions where I've actually been in a plane that's been stacked, and it's really only one was a tailwind coming from America, one was fog in Lisbon, another one was an emergency at Stansted where there were people on the runways, and what was the other one? There was another one. But anyway, it normally is only on an emergency situation. Am I right? That's one question. But the main thing is that how often in the last year, perhaps not the last year, but in the last 2 or 3 years, the stacking actually happened? Because just recently we've just come into the airport and that's it. So really my question is, how often can we expect stacking over St Neots, which is the place I represent? That's one question. You've already alluded to why you can't move it, the stacking pattern, a little bit to the left or to the west, so it would miss Huntingdon and St Neots adequately. And I can see from what you're saying here, it might be a little bit awkward, but I would really ask you to consider moving it a little bit towards Rushden. I'm not being a NIMBY on this, of course, but it does make sense as far as I'm concerned. My fourth question is, are we looking at a precursor to an extra runway at either Stansted or Luton?
Okay. I'll answer those questions best I can to start with. You'll hopefully forgive me, I didn't actually write them all down, but I will try to go through them one at a time. I'm sure you'll remind me. So firstly, the holding pattern itself, it's not true that hold only happened because of emergencies or special occasions. It happens because of the simple bunching of traffic where we can't get aircraft all to land at the same time. I'll bring Adrian in a couple of moments' time to discuss that and to explain that to you. Hopefully along the same lines as I've already discussed. But he is he's an air traffic controller and an expert in these matters. I can do what I can on this. But it is not true that that an event has to happen for there to be holding. Holds happen all the time. If you're interested, one loop, if you like, one orbit of the holding pattern is a 4-minute delay for any given aircraft. It's 1 minute turn, 1 minute straight, 1 minute turn, 1 minute straight, and back to where you were again. So if that's just of interest to you. Part of it, I believe, was it about height? No, it wasn't about height. Do forgive me.
It was moving it a little bit left to Rushden.
I see. So firstly, again, I urge you to respond to that effect as part of your response. If there is a consensus amongst the council, or if individuals would prefer to see it move one way or the other, again, it is fixed in that general location, and we set things up for the consultation to be like this. It could be moved relatively small distances perhaps. Again, it depends, and possibly raised as per your previous colleague, Councillor Orban. So all these things may be possible. I cannot guarantee at this stage that it would happen, but I can say that the feedback that you give us like that, and specifically the reasons why, that's the important part of it from our point of view, in that having a response that comes from a collective body that has thought through the consequences of it is always very, very valuable. As you can imagine, we get an awful lot of "I don't like planes, please go away," and that's all we get, which doesn't help us at all. If you have I can explain what the impact would be on your area, on your residents as a stakeholder, and also what a mitigating action might be, and a recommendation or a suggestion, that itself is also very, very a really, really useful part of a consultation response. I'll bring Adrian in very shortly, if that's okay. Adrian, would you like to briefly discuss holding as a concept, if that's okay, to explain the holding, how holds work essentially?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Good evening, everybody. Can I just check that you can hear me okay? Because I've got a new set of earbuds on.
Yep.
So, yeah, so good evening. I am an air traffic control. I do the Essex radar sector, which is the bit that we're on about with Stansted that shares the hold. I'm also the ATC lead that's had a hand in designing this. So, I mean, I can come back on a few of your questions as well, just to add to Colin, but I'll do the holding bit first. It is part and parcel of our day job, really, is holding. It's the reason why we do hold quite a lot now, unfortunately, at Stansted and Luton. The reason why is because it's quite busy in the airspace and it's complex. It doesn't even have to be busy to hold. It's just the way that it goes. And Stansted is a lot busier than Luton. So when we actually split the two off, or hopefully we can split the two off, holding at Luton is going to be an awful lot less than what we do now, purely because we've got rid of that complexity. The way that I can probably explain it to you is that what we're trying to do in a way is a bypass going around a town, even because sometimes there'll be no traffic about, but the traffic lights are still red when you go through the centre of town. However, if you do the bypass route, you can just quite happily drive around it. And this is essentially what's kind of going to happen here. We have, if there's one aircraft coming into Stansted from the west, say it comes from Belfast or Edinburgh, which EasyJet and Ryanair do quite a lot, unfortunately. They go into Stansted. If it's coming the opposite direction, then we have to try and sort out that complexity of how we're going to get that Luton that the EasyJet comes in, say, from Greece. When you've got the people come back off their holiday, how do we get them back in? And sometimes we have to just give them a quick spin just to keep them out the way at a certain level while we dart the other one in. So by taking away the complexity, we get more streamlined. So yes, holding will be a lot less, but I will admit to you, it is part and parcel of our day job where planes do hold. It is just the way it goes. No air traffic controller wants to hold an aircraft, because what's the point? We always want to get it from A to B as efficiently, as quickly as we can. That is our day job, is to get it from point A to point B without delay, but primarily it's safety. Safety comes first, and then it comes efficiency. So from that picture that Colin's put up there, yes, you can see the lines that go over St. Neots. That is just a very basic picture. If we're not holding the planes, they won't get there. So for example, where you see Bedford, just to there we go. If it's not going to hold, we won't take it to the hold before we turn it off. If there's no delay, it will get a turn before that. And for a good example is what we do today is if you go to Milton Keynes, where we've got the arrow pointing to Milton Keynes, we will just descend it from there and it will go straight into Luton. It won't get anywhere near the hold if there's no delay. It's as simple as that. That's what we do. That's what we like to do. No controller wants to hold a plane because that's when it starts backing up. So we are trained, if there's no holding, we are trained not to put it anywhere near the hold. It just goes on its standard route. And then when we can, we will put it on a shortcut because it saves fuel, it saves time. And that's how all this works. From a selfish point, I'm speaking as an air traffic controller now on the radar. First thing I do when I get a plane is I want to get rid of it. And that is by transferring it to the next sector. So to do that is to do it as efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
Because then I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah. Can I just come in? can I just come in there? I mean, I live in St Neots or in Eton Soken, and you've got 3 blue arrows coming over, presumably my house. And I have to say, I'm very, very rarely conscious of any planes coming over. Presumably, the ones that do coming or going into Luton. But I still would say, if it's possible, we do have a population in St Neots of 40,000 and rising. If it's possible to move that loop over to the west towards probably only, I don't know, probably 10 miles over to the left towards Rushden, you're then right in the countryside.
So I fully understand. I fully understand what you're saying, Derek.
I would hope that would go in our recommendation.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying there, and believe you me, we probably try to put the hold in 5 different places. Where you say where Rushden is there, the way I can explain that, if I had a radar screen picture, I'd love to show it you. So, because to tell you what goes over there is that you get all the outbounds from every single London airport. So not only Luton, but they're the ones that climb up on that track. That track there that Colin's showing, that yellow arrow going northwest bound, that is used by all the Heathrow outbounds that go to America, because they use the Great Circle route. So everything that goes to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, every one, which there's over 200 a day out of Heathrow, and for United, British Airways, you can name them. They're all climbing out really slowly. They have to be at 5,000 feet before they hit Luton's airspace, and then they slowly climb because they're really heavy, full fuel load, fuel passengers, and they probably can make about 12,000 feet by the time they hit Northampton if they're lucky. So you get all those. Then you get underneath those, you get the Luton, EasyJet and Ryanair that climb out underneath it. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm sure you don't want me to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Derek, Councillor Giles, and thank you, Adrian, for your expert knowledge there. I'll just say from the chair, and just so we're all very clear on this, I mean, the purpose of this evening is to obviously ask questions of what we're doing, and to put some points to our cabinet, who will make the final recommendation. I'm sure we're not necessarily going to be picking on neighbouring areas to suggest we move the stack, because it's inconvenient to us unless we have a very good reason. So if there are any press listening in, I wouldn't want them to think that Huntingdonshire District Councils would suggest otherwise. So if I may, because most of the questions I wanted to ask have been asked, and in fact Councillor Gardner asked the first one, which was moving the stack up by 1,000 feet. So I'm pleased that's something we can consider. I might be a little bit, the first point I would ask is, this consultation started in October. It's now obviously January. For a change as big as this, it does seem to be a little rust in terms of, there's lots of expert information within a very dense document, and I know there's an abridged version. It's quite a lot for lay people such as ourselves to take on board. And I just wondered why the rust. I have got a couple of questions here, and dare I say, how, and forgive me for saying this, how independent are the conclusions and the findings, particularly some of those more technical points in the report? So as a member of the public, speaking on behalf of members of the public, can we believe some of the data that's in there? And I'll give you an example. I mean, when Councillor Gardner mentioned the number of decibels in our countryside here in Huntingdonshire, and forgive me, Councillor Giles, I'm not talking about St Neots here, I'm talking about the rural countryside, of which some of us represent across this here. It really is as quiet, or in fact more quiet, as you might find in a library. So please don't be too dismissive of that finding.
That was absolutely not my intention, sir. Not at all. It was a surprise that it would be that low from my.
Well, it is quite, yes, and I welcome you to put on a pair of hiking boots and come, walk along some of our footpaths that are very quiet. So that question was asked. So why the rust? I'd like that to be answered. Do we need more time, particularly when I understand from Nicole, who I recognise from the video, that it's not going to be enacted until February 2022. So it feels to me as though there is time. That's one question. So why the rust? probably obvious, but this whole thing is to move the stacks from Stansted and Luton. But it's just Luton and Nats that are authoring this report. I just wondered, it's probably obvious the answer, but why Stansted aren't co-authoring or involved with this report? Why is it just Luton and Nats? That's my second question. A naive question, and thank you for returning to the this picture. I appreciate that. The red area, and don't laugh, those of you in more knowledgeable than I am. Again, I think I know the answer, but has anyone spoken with representatives from the military to ask why they need such a huge area here? Bearing in mind, much of that is rural. There aren't many houses. Could that area be reduced? In which case, the stack could be moved perhaps more towards the east. So that's my question there about why has no one spoken to the military. And I think I might just going through my questions there. Yeah, finally, margin of error. You're showing what in layman's terms looks like a racetrack. Obviously, it's not a racetrack, but in terms of the pattern, it's not going to be as neat or as pretty as that in practice, is it? When planes are using that stack in practice, there's going to be a margin of error there, and I'll be interested to understand what that margin of error is in terms of how wide that area will actually be in practice. I'll leave it there. I'm conscious there's quite a few questions there. I'm happy to repeat them if necessary. So Colin, questions to you, please.
I've got 3 of them down here. I believe one of them is the apparent rapidity of this piece of work. I think I'll bring Nicole in for that. She can also answer perhaps Councillor Giles's previous question on is there going to be another runway at either airport as well, just to finish that one off. So Nicole, are you okay to do that? I'll leave my map up on the screen. I'll turn my face off for a second.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. I'll go with the question around runways first, because that one's a little easier. So talking just from a Luton perspective, I can't obviously talk about Stansted. From Luton, we've got no plans for a second runway. We don't have the land for it. Number one, our airport's in Bedfordshire. Just across the boundary is Hertfordshire, so we're not looking to expand into a different county. Also, we get quite a lot of questions of, okay, well, if you're not going to build another runway, are you going to extend your runway to allow bigger aircraft? Again, that's something that we can't do. You might have flown from Luton, and as you approach the airport, you'll see that the end of the runway is actually a cliff. So we can't extend the runway that way, and also the other end of the runway is a road. So there's no extensions or second runways planned for Luton Airport. Regarding the airspace change and the consultation length, so any airspace change even, sorry, would follow the CAP 1616 process, as Colin spoke about earlier. So that is a 7-stage process, and the consultation is stage three of that. In CAP 1616, it says that we have to do a 12-week consultation. This consultation is just over 15 weeks. So we are going kind of a bit above and beyond, which is why the deadline of 5th of February is quite a fixed deadline, and we wouldn't be looking to extend that. After we close the consultation, we obviously have to categorise the responses and make any changes to our final design. We are looking to submit to the CAA in June 2021, and then that is when the Civil Aviation Authority have a look at the design, do all the checks, and give us an answer. There is obviously training time in there for air traffic controllers and pilots and things like that. We also have to test it in simulators. So there's quite a lot to be done between the consultation closing and implementation, should it be approved.
Thanks, Nicole. If you're okay for me to carry on with the next part of the question,
yes,
which I think was about why wasn't Stansted involved in this? Is that the main one? The next part of it, I believe.
Yep.
So to start with, well, also write down the Air Force one as well. I remember. So to start with, yes, Stansted was involved to start with. and then they withdrew. The main reason was because, if I refer to my geography back up here again, it's possible to move the Luton arrivals without affecting any other air traffic flow at all. Moving the Stansted arrivals would necessarily involve moving a whole bunch of other stuff, which is too difficult to even comprehend. So the simplest, quickest, easiest way of doing it would be to move the Luton Airport arrivals off to the north like this, leaving the Stansted stuff essentially unchanged. Now, that means that Stansted essentially gets a free benefit, because the holding for Stansted will also reduce slightly because there are no Lutons in the way, but it's a mutual benefit. So Luton and Stansted would both get the airspace efficiency improvement. Your next question, I believe, was on the Air Force and the red area. So yes, of course, we have the Ministry of Defence in all its guises. That includes not just the Air Force, the Navy, who fly obviously the US Air Force Base, and the Army Air helicopters as well. They have a central kind of contact for exactly this sort of thing, known as the Defence Airspace and Air Traffic Management Centre. And essentially, anybody who has any airspace change of any sort needs to get in touch with them to ensure that there's no national security issues. And of course, we have been involved from the beginning, from very early stages. We've been discussing with not only the Ministry of Defence as a whole, but also we've actually been up to Lakenheath a couple of times to actually visit and to talk to them about how their RAPCON centre works and how they operate their flights. It may seem that this is actually a large area. It's quite small compared from a US Air Force Base point of view. They would rather have, I think, the entirety of East Anglia, all of the southeast, and half of the Midlands as well. But we are trying to impact every stakeholder as little as possible. That's a requirement of what we're trying to do. So yes, we are definitely in conversation with the US Air Force on how they operate their flights and so on. I could show you a map of the one of the smaller areas they use, but I think I'll just get bogged down in technical detail. But the area that we've got here is actually quite small, and it goes much further than that. So we are actually encroaching on their airspace already, essentially. I might talk to Adrian. I might get Adrian to have a brief discussion on holding accuracy for the racetrack pattern here. From my point of view, they would hold very well, and the higher the aircraft go, the bigger the hold because of how airspeed varies at height. Adrian, can I bring you in for a very brief discussion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's three ways that you can really hold in this circular pattern as such. You can have a conventional hold, which is just done by nav aids on the ground. And yes, sometimes they cannot be very accurate at all. The plane and the pilot just trying to interpret it where the nav aid is on the ground, and they fly. It's a bit like a needle in the plane. They fly the needle. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes it's a little bit off track. What this hold is, it has no ground base. It's all done on satellite navigation, and there's two types of that. There's what we call RNAV5 and RNAV1. We've gone for the very high spec RNAV1. We're trying to do it for the future. And RNAV1 basically means that they follow the needle and it's right on track. And to give an example of that, we've done this out of Gatwick Airport on one of their departures, and even in a howling gale, they just do not move off that track. It's like a pinprick over the ground. The planes, all these modern ones now, the Airbus 320s and the new Boeings, all of them, the new Airbus 350, they can literally fly a needle. If you had a needle in the haystack, they would fly over it if that's where you coded it. And what we have to do, we have our designers, it's not just what we want, it has to go to the coding house, and they design it so these planes can fly them. If we design something the plane can't fly, then it gets chucked out. So the design makes sure they can fly the needle, if you like, and fly the track, even how they get entry of the hold. So it is extremely, extremely accurate, no matter what the wind's doing. So it is going to be highly accurate. Now that is the future. It's a bit like a sat nav in a car. You can buy a £50 sat nav, but it still tells you that you're on the motorway or at a junction. And you imagine that they pay thousands of pounds for these satellite equipment now. It is highly accurate, and that is the future, and that's what we're going for.
Thanks, Adrian. So I think from the point of view of not terrifying everybody by having exactly the same track flown every single time, is relatively speaking, that is true, in that the holding pattern we've sketched up here is reasonably accurate at that particular altitude of 8,000 feet. with the entry, as I said, as Adrian said, the entry may extend slightly in different directions to join the holding pattern. But the higher the aircraft are, the pattern changes. Essentially, it grows very slightly in this direction, like that, because the higher aircraft are, they follow the speed reference changes. So they have to fly a higher ground speed to have the same airspeed. And I don't think we need to get into the details of that, but essentially, the higher the aircraft is in the holding pattern itself, the slightly wider it would be, and the lower it would be close to this particular pattern that we've got here, assuming, of course, that the hold is in exactly this location from here onwards. And your feedback will help shape where that actually ends up.
Thank you, Colin. Can I just come back to you, if I may, on the Air Force question I asked earlier?
Yes.
You said the Air Force would love to have the whole of East Anglia as area, and of course they don't. They have a much smaller area than that. You didn't say that you'd gone to them and asked whether or not that holding stack could be moved, as I say, slightly more toward the east, which would be in a more rural part of this area, and in fact it would overlap in some cases. So is that a conversation you are prepared to have, or have you already had it?
We have had discussions with the Air Force, and we are in regular contact with them on this. The specifics of the holding pattern are simply one part of it. So yes, the holding pattern is where it is because that's where we think it would best be suited from an air traffic point of view. The holding pattern over here, I can't really, I'm difficult to explain. Let me turn my camera off for a moment. So there are other things over here that are not shown on here, whereas there's a holding pattern that is used by the military that's around about here, and another one that's around about here, not shown on this picture. Those are used all the time by the aircraft arriving at Mildenhall in particular, and sometimes into Lakenheath too. Another part of it is the discussion where the arrivals that come in from this direction over Bury St Edmunds and Newmarket towards Cambridge and then over towards the hold. The runway configuration at Lakenheath is such that one of their arrival routes kind of goes in this sort of area, give or take. Actually, it's more like over here. So we're in constant discussion with them about how we can work together to ensure that the operation that they want to do, the operation that we want to do, and the other impacts on all the other airspace users are indeed balanced and traded off against each other where that's possible to do so. Does that make it a little easier? Please be assured we are in regular contact with the relevant branches of the forces.
Thank you, that does. I'm conscious Councillor Auburn's got his hand up. I'll just rephrase the question again Councillor Gardner asked earlier about pollution. And if the stack was 1,000 feet high, starting 1,000 feet high, and I know that's something which we will put into the paper. And you were saying there's no data to support what that would look like because it goes under your kind of minimum value. Is that something you can model or you can help us with? Because at the moment we don't really have any expert kind of opinion here to help, or dare I say, argue the veracity of the data other than what we're largely being presented with.
Okay, if we're talking from a trust point of view, which I guess is a big part of this.
Yeah, I wouldn't ever say that publicly, but yes, that's kind of what I'm saying.
No, of course. We are regulated entirely and strongly by the Civil Aviation Authority, and we would not get to, they have approved every single step of this. Every single document that's been produced has been under their authority, if you like. If I bring my document over here, I believe you can see that this is the document the consultation document itself. It's a little bit small perhaps on this screen, but this is the document that's freely available for download in the virtual exhibition area and from the consultation website. These tables, let me zoom in a little bit, that might make it easier. These tables are CAA's own data. And so the 55 decibel LA max noise here, as I said before, it stops at 55 because below that level, there's a brief paragraph about it here. The accuracy of individual aircraft noise readings is difficult to maintain, and it tends to be masked by background noise. We are clearly well aware, and we would never even attempt to say that aircraft are silent above 8,000 feet, above 7,000 feet, or any given altitude, because we've all experienced an aircraft. For example, if you've looked at flight radar or one of the many plane finder type things, you can see aircraft at 15, 20, 30,000 feet, and you can sometimes hear them as well. So from the point of view of adding 1,000 feet to it, I would be a fool to try and guess at the decibel reduction, but I would say it's probably 1 or 2. And maybe as far as 3. Oh, Gesundheit, Councillor Banks. Maybe as high as 3. I'm not quite sure, but typically a noticeable reduction is around about 3 decibels from a human ear point of view, give or take. So I'd say it's 1 or 2 possibly, but overall, the higher the aircraft, the less the overall impact on the ground of noise.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. But and that's a comment we may put in. It would have been useful to have seen a table which would have at least some modelling, even if it's not necessarily accurate. A range, as there is a range in there. But I've made my point. I'm not necessarily going to.
We get our data from the CAA for this very purpose, for consultation purposes. So yeah, we haven't got any modelling beyond that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. Councillor Warburton, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you go back, please, to the map that had the sort of the Big Dad's Army type arrows on it? That's the one. Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to. There's 2 questions that have come to me through your presentation. One's just going back to this North Sea issue. If the arrow, the east-west arrow at the bottom, is the main direction of east flights, could you clarify what I'm missing? Why the planes couldn't be held in a holding pattern and brought straight in on that east-west line? And the other question is based on the basis that wherever it goes, if it's approved, that at the moment we don't have a holding pattern in Huntingdonshire. Wherever it's put, if it's approved, how many flights are residents likely to appear to have going over them, roughly? Based on the current flights that, on average, that are put into holding patterns over Luton and or Stansted at the moment, please.
Okay. I'll answer the latter question first, if that's okay, and I'll bring Adrian in shortly because he is the ATC expert. From the point of view of the number of flights likely to be experienced, one part of this presentation that I didn't really go into is, but Adrian touched on earlier, is that the thing a controller wants to do is to get rid of the aeroplanes that he's got. And around about 30% of all arrivals to Luton and to Stansted, but especially to Luton, actually avoid the holding area entirely. So that means that if I can, what I'll do is I'll drag my other screen over, if that's okay. I'll bring the, there we go here. No, that's the wrong one. Do excuse me for a second whilst I bring it across. There it is. So table 5 in this document, which I will scroll down and try and find here. There we go. There we go. So each option, there are 2 airspace options, both of which, from your point of view, are relatively the same. They don't make any difference to you. But the table here does have the information that you'll find helpful. So in the summer, with the expectation for 2022, which is the implementation year, the peak day would be round about 249, 250 flights. An average day would be 220 flights. But that's 100% essentially. So if I take 30% off that, what's that? 200? That's about 170 odd, 100 and something like that. That would be the number of flights on per day that would expect to be. If I go back to my map here, there, in this kind of area, whether they be from this direction, this direction, or this direction. So that the 170 odd flights would be around here. About half, maybe just over half, would be coming from this direction, doing this, which I think is on the previous slide or the next slide. I've forgotten. No, it's the next slide after that. The one with the smaller arrows on. That makes more sense. Yeah, this one here. So if I say around half of all Luton arrivals would come in from this direction, and a few more would come in from this direction, another 10–15%. So essentially from that, we can work out, give or take, what the the number is going to be, if I bring that again, there it is. So I did actually work it out. There we go. So 150, give or take, on a daily average. This is on a busy summer's day. Obviously, in the winter it may be quieter, but there may be peaks and troughs during that period as well. The average per hour is also there, as is the expected maximum peak per hour. This under the various scenarios that we've discussed. So you can essentially take around 30% off all these figures, because the rest of them would be coming in, as Adrian was saying, directly like this, or perhaps even from the south like this, and would actually avoid the entire holding area. Does that provide you with the information?
Sort of. I'm a bit sort of baffled by statistics at the moment. So just to clarify,
yeah.
If the holding pattern wasn't there, if the CAA say no, it's not going there, will flights still? Sorry, I'm pointing. Nobody can see me pointing. Will those blue arrows that are sort of congregating on St Neots, will there be flights coming into Huntingdonshire anyway, even if a holding pattern isn't put over southern Huntingdonshire?
If this proposal was not progressed for whatever reason, if it was denied by the CAA or for whatever reason, then the orange arrows are all you would see. There would be this airspace here. This is currently would be a new volume of airspace.
Yeah.
Therefore, that would be there is no airspace there at the moment from the point of view of the airspace change itself. Therefore,
that's what
the orange arrows would be what happens today, and that would carry on happening. Therefore, there'll be no blue arrows at all. Does that answer the question? Does that? I think that's what you're asking.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Wyatt. Thank you.
I misunderstood in the first place. My apologies.
That's all right. No, you didn't. No, I sort of asked a supplementary question because I wasn't sure, but you've clarified. Ish. Thank you. And it was just the point about the North Sea and the main east-west flight route that I had outstanding.
Okay.
So I can do the quickly North Sea holding if you want me to, Councillor Alban.
Thank you.
Yeah, so from an air traffic point of view, the further away the hold is, the more difficult and complex it is really to get at an airport, and it makes it very complicated to make it an efficient airport. I'll give you an example. Apart from Heathrow and Manchester, which we're not interested in, all the other airports really only have one single runway, so we have to share departures and arrivals. So what we do, we space the arrivals out, which is normally 6 or 7 miles apart, so we have time to get the aircraft on the runway and safely away. And you do that from the holding pattern. So if we had the holding pattern over the North Sea, I've just done a quick calculation, even though we did look at that, you're talking between 80 and 100 miles away as a minimum. A plane from there will only do 4 miles a minute at maximum, and it has to slow down, obviously, on the final approach. So you're talking about half an hour to get from that hold to the airport. If the tower person says to me, you can start packing closer the aircraft together than 6 miles, you'll have to wait half an hour to see that benefit. So all of a sudden we're losing capacity on that runway, which in turn increases the likelihood that we'll have to hold, because we can only bring them from the hold into the sequence when we know how many aircraft we can get to land. Because once you bring them off the hold, you're more committed on getting them to the runway then. So that's what the problem is. It'll mean that the capacity at the airfield will go down and delays will go up the further away you have that holding fix. So equally, that if we do packing where we can do 3 miles apart, and you have a lovely stream of aircraft that you're 3 miles apart going towards Luton, and then the tower guy phones up, I've got 3 to get away now, they're all coming out. I say, sorry, you're going to have to wait 15 minutes because I've got all these off. So that's why you can't go too far away with a holding pattern, and it will be combined and still trying to get through Stansted. Again, you still got the traffic light syndrome where we need to get through the other traffic anyway. So yes, holding is great, but we'd only be holding high level over the sea anyway. So it really doesn't work from an air traffic design point of view, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think it's back to me now. I'm not seeing any more hands up. So I'll just give members, if anyone yet wants to raise their hand. I've got a raised hand by Councillor Diaz. Councillor Diaz, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. It was just coming back to an earlier question with respect to Rushden, because looking at the arrows, and thank you very much for the very detailed explanations. It's been a fascinating evening, really, to find out so much about this. I've just picked up on the arrows then. So these are all coming over St. Neots, much more than Huntington. And this earlier question about could it be moved slightly towards Rushden, if that could reduce the amount of planes coming over St. Neots, I think it would be worth considering. Obviously we don't want to shift it over to another area that's going to cause lots of problems. That's not the point. But bearing in mind the density of population at St. Neots, and bearing in mind that there might be some leeway, I would like that to be perhaps considered. Is that all right? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, you're welcome. I don't think that needs an answer actually, unless you particularly wanted to answer Mr. Wyatt.
Well, really from you, Darren, because Councillor Darren Tyson, because I think it was you that sort of mentioned, oh, well, we don't want to just shift the problem. But having looked at all the arrows, there might be some leeway there to move it a bit. So I would like to perhaps keep that on the agenda, along with the altitude issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think my point was if we are suggesting moving that stack, and I'm sure that many of us would like to see that move. Certainly, I fully understand and appreciate that. It needs to be evidence based.
Yes,
what's the justification of doing so? Because clearly, we'd all prefer not to have it here.
I totally agree with you.
And that's what I think is missing from this report. Quite frankly, we've been presented, if I may say so, particularly with what's relevant to us here in Huntingdon's here, with a fait complete field as to where the stack is. We haven't seen any evidence as to why it can't be anywhere else other than what's being explained this evening. So I think there are some of the questions that I would imagine we will be asking through Cabinet when that final letter goes to the consultation. So I'm conscious, Councillor Giles, have you got another question to ask? Anything additional to what you've already asked?
Yeah, no, it's just about this. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Sure.
You're saying, oh, well, it's a fait accompli. We're sitting here. We've spent an hour and a half listening to this. If it's already decided, what the heck are we doing here? My point is that we've already heard from the gentleman who are doing the presentation that, yeah, they could well look at 9,000 feet. I'm asking, and one or two others are asking, okay, if you can look at 9,000 feet, can you not look at moving it 10 miles to the west? If you don't ask, you don't get, for goodness sake.
Completely agree with you, and that's really what we're doing this evening. Certainly moving the stack up is going to have a huge benefit. I think the point I'm making is the options we've been presented with are very much around the vectoring and the option A and B. We haven't been presented, other than what we're putting forward this evening, with other options. So we should be doing that, and it feels to me we're being rushed into that, and that's something I'm not overly happy with. I would like more time to look at other options so we can suggest sensible suggestions to how that stack can be moved and how it can be increased in height. So I'm sure we will do that through Cabinet. Any other hands up? I saw Councillor Orban's hand's gone down now. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm just mindful. I don't know how many members of the public are listening in or watching in this evening. We have received through your town and parish councils copies of letters which have been sent into the district council. So I'm not going to go through those this evening, but all members of this panel have read them, And I am confident that you know, the themes, and they are themes of those letters, you know, very good, very important points that have been made, have been raised this evening on, you know, on your behalf through councillors this evening. But just before I close this item, members, looking through those letters that you've seen copies of, are you confident you've covered those points raised by those town and parish councils on their behalf? Just before we close, Councillor Warburton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final question. That sort of on behalf of all the people that made comments and all the parishes. What happens if the modelling if this is approved and the modelling is wrong and all the figures are out of kilter? Where does that leave Huntingdonshire and where does that leave our residents?
Okay, I think we'll ask Colin if he can answer that one.
Essentially, so I think you're asking that the numbers we have are the best we can provide based on the research done by the CAA and our own best predictions. All consultations like this are always based on our best estimates, best evidence that we can provide at the time. All we can suggest is our proposal is that we think around 70% of the arrivals would go towards the vicinity of the hold, with 30% of them doing the shortcut as described by Adrian, my colleague. If that turned out to be 75-25 or 66-33, I still think the overall concept is still proven, but the actual specific numbers were based on the best estimates we could do given the situation at the time. I don't know if I can answer that any better than that, to be honest.
So you've sort of not really answered the question. I appreciate you've given the best figures possible, but what happens if what happens in the situation if they are wrong? What do you do, and what do we tell our residents that?
I see. My apologies. I misunderstood that. Yes. So the process of airspace change is 7 stages. I mentioned it earlier at the start of the presentation. The first stage was I won't bother going through the whole lot, but essentially once on making a massive assumption that nothing changes from today and we get exactly what is stated in the consultation material, which is unlikely because I don't think I've ever been involved in an airspace change where we've made no changes based on feedback, because that would be breaking the gunning principles essentially from the consultation side of things. On the assumption that this thing is brought in and established exactly as per, then after a year of operation, the CAA is required to perform a post-implementation review. That is the final stage of the process, stage 7. Therefore, a year of operation will then provide data to the CAA. Essentially, we would compare, or the CAA would compare what we said would happen, what we thought would happen, versus what actually happens in the light of a year's worth of experience of it. And should the CAA decide that what's actually happening is significantly different to what we said would happen, regardless of how good our estimates were, then they could change something about it. They could insist on a change, whether it would be another airspace change, actually reverting it to the pre-implementation system would be very, very difficult, because that would actually decrease aviation safety in the region, which is something that was unlikely to occur. But then the CAA has the power to decide what happens at stage 7. Until stage 7 is complete, the post-implementation review, where a year's worth of data is analysed, the airspace change is not fully complete until that time. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're nearly there. I mean, certainly, if the panel are in agreement with me, I think, apart from the recommendation which Councillor Gardner suggested, which was to start the stack 1,000 feet higher, which we can put in the consultation, I think I'm hearing, we haven't seen enough rigor in terms of the selection of the holding stack in its current position. And I'd like to see a bit more evidence that other locations have been considered, and we've heard they have. We have heard that this evening, but we've not seen much written evidence of moving this stack, whether it's 10 miles east or or whether it's more towards Ruston. I'd like to see a bit more evidence there. That's the point I'm making. We've presented with this without really much opportunity. So that's hopefully our contribution this evening. So public, thank you. Well, just before I finish this item, can I just ask, thank Adrian, Nicole and Colin for answering questions this evening. I hope you found it useful as well to hear what members have to say. Can I just ask you, there's still time for the consultation. It doesn't finish yet. Can you just remind us when that consultation finishes? And would you be willing to attend town or parish councils if they are able to schedule you in the almost certainly going to be a Zoom or a team-based meeting before the consultation period finishes? So 2 questions there. When does the consultation period finish? Can you just remind us of that, please? And can you will one or more of you be willing to attend town and parish council meetings if there's still time?
I'll take that. Thank you, Councillor Tyso. So there's the first question is the consultation finishes on Friday, the 5th of February at 1 minute before midnight. I believe it is, automatically closes at that time. That is 4 weeks tomorrow night. Yep. So there is time for that. There is time for that. The second part of it is we have already held local government meetings very similar to this, the exact opposite way around, where we were hosting and people were joining us on Teams, and the same presentation that you've just seen, perhaps with more detail, and the full presentation was presented, and we had a similar Q&A session with parish councillors, town councillors and so on. We've done 3 local government webinar sessions like that, and is it 8 or 9? 8 public webinar sessions, again in that sort of way. And should there be a need for a group of parish councils, for example, to say, well, we'd like to have a meeting with 3 or 4 parishes, for example, I'm sure we can arrange that in the time that we have left, and we can do exactly the same presentation and have a full and frank discussion, much as we've had this evening. I hope that's useful to you. If I may add an extra item to the end of it, from a written evidence point of view regarding other holding areas, there are published documents under stage 2 of it, of this particular airspace change proposal. The CAA has an airspace change portal of where all this information is held. It is public. I can dig out the link for you very shortly if you'd like, and we can perhaps add that as an email to you separately later on and describe how it works. Under stage 2 of the process, which is where the design concepts are drawn up, discussed and then rejected on various grounds, that explains how we got to where we are, and I can either send you the link to the document itself, or I can describe where to find it on the public airspace change portal. Would that be of use to you, sir?
Yes, please. I mean, can I ask you to send that through Finley, please, and he will make sure it goes to all members of that panel. But again, it reinforces the point I made. It feels to me, and I do appreciate the timeline that Nicole outlined. It feels a lot of information to absorb in not a lot of time. And particularly the bit that's relevant to really us in Huntingdonshire is this holding stack over our district, because the other part of the document is less relevant to us in this particular area. But I'm sure you appreciate the point I'm making.
Of course.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to finish that item in that case. So thank you ever so much, and I don't see any further hands up. So so we will leave it there. So thank you. And can you unshare your screen, please, so we can come back to the normal screen? Or lovely.
My apologies. There we go. Thank you.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Right. So we don't have an item 5. So
but we will need to formally resolve to defer it.
Okay. Is there some words there, or do I just need to say, can we formally resolve to defer this item? Yeah. Can I just have a show of hands, please? That's fine. I think we have formally resolved to defer this item to another meeting. That's lovely. Okay. Right. Just to Adam, I'm just conscious of the last item, and I don't want detail. How much time is there between you typing up the notes of this meeting, this last item, and it going to cabinet? Because normally turnaround is quite quick, but I would normally, and sorry for having this conversation publicly, but I would normally like a bit of time to review the notes and possibly even just check with the panel that it's an accurate reflection, because it's quite important that we get the detail right.
Oh, so you mean the comments that I sent to cabinet for the consideration? Normally I get them turned around within a day or two, so that they're ready to be published with the agenda. So probably you're looking Monday afternoon. Okay. All
right. Yeah. Any draft, please, to me, because I want to make sure we've reflected the points that are made this evening. Okay. Finally, then, actually, so over to you again, Adam. This is where you help me go through the work program on pages 25 to 30.
Yeah, it's a short update this month. So yeah, under page, but like I said, under page 25 to 30, you'll find the work program. Basically the strategic review of markets due to commence later on this month. Dates for those meetings will be arranged in the coming weeks. Also, as the chairman previously mentioned at the start of the meeting, there will be a review, task and finish review into the floods that happened last month. And obviously the purpose of the study is to compile evidence and learn lessons for future incidents and a scoping document should be finalised sometime next week. And yeah, that's basically it. That concludes my update, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any more questions on that. Right. Gosh, I've done well this evening. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening. You can now go back to whatever you were doing or beforehand, and I see you all at the next meeting.